this case is about the bulk data collection program operated by the National Security Agency. What viewers are about to see is not a debate on the merits of that program and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. That's for two reasons. One, as a matter of substance, the issues before us start with legal issues about whether this court even has the jurisdiction to resolve any or all of the questions raised by the plaintiffs.
In a world where there are now more ways than ever before to sneak past security, be it viral or right out in the open, security experts will insist the secret collection of data, your data, helps to save lives and protect your way of life. But others are tired of the intrusion and cry that if done within the law, no security will be lost and Americans will be protected from intrusive government meddling. Add the ACLU to the mix, dash of Supreme Court, and you have the makings of another fallout from the Edward Snowden affair. Welcome to MidPoint, managing attorney for Gonzalez Law Associates, and a specialist in federal and constitutional law, Carlos Gonzalez, and retired U.S. Marine Corps veteran and advocate for veterans everywhere. Pleasure to welcome Jessie Jane Duff back into the program. We thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Jessie, I'm going to begin with you. Ladies first here today. The ACLU going after the NSA right now. They're determined to make sure that they hammer down on all of this illegal data collection. But wait a minute now. Let's ask something from the strategic side of things in national security. And I know some people are going to be very unhappy about the question to begin with. Is all this surveillance a necessary evil, or did the NSA just go too far?
First of all, it's not an evil, because everybody is so upset with the president right now, claiming that we're not safe enough. Now, what is the sole purpose of the National Security Agency? NSA, sole purpose is collection data to keep Americans safe. That is his entire purpose. Right now, cyber warfare throughout the world is at an all-time high. So if we cannot see what terrorists are doing within our own country, guess what? We are now opening the borders for them to come in and have free reign. So our liberty and our freedom should not be used against us where we're unable to even protect ourselves. I've supported the NSA for years in various contracts, and I can assure people they're not sitting there individually listening to all our phone calls. What it is an algorithm setup that is basically looking for particularly keywords. How do you know when the chatter is rising? How do we know when it's time to raise our terrorism threat if we get rid of the NSA's capabilities? People have to ask themselves that. Paranoia should not be allowed to fester within this country to a point where we now decrease our capability to stay free and safe.
Carlos, I think that's a very good point that a lot of people would argue back. They would say this is just paranoia and things have changed. This is the 21st century where data moves in milliseconds at this point. It's so easy to steal, as we even saw this week in the stealing of pictures from celebrities. So why not have this sort of security? It's necessary in order to keep people from being killed by terrorists.
Well, I tend to disagree. I don't think it's necessary at all. I think it's an unnecessary evil. For the most part, we're a country founded on civil liberties, liberties of the individual, privacy, etc. And from my understanding, the collection of this data and the review of this data is significantly behind. For example, I believe I've read some studies that tell me that we're looking at a 1 to 2 year delay on the review of much of the data that's been collected. My greater concern is not with the collection itself, but with the transparency of that collection. We have no real idea of what these particular keywords or buzzwords are that are being looked for, what the programs are, et cetera. We do have litigation by the New York Civil Liberties Union and the ACLU that's ultimately attempted to try to clarify the issue for us, but they've been fought every step of the way. Initially, we had a case that was dismissed on standing issues, which is literally ridiculous because every single citizen of the United States, even non-citizen of the United States, as long as you are on the grounds of this country, ultimately have standing to argue a communication issue in this day and age where data, as we've mentioned, is being transported or transcribed in milliseconds.
Carlos, if I may interrupt for just a moment here, and when we're talking about all this information and we're talking about the gathering of this, though, you talk about keywords and certain ways that people will now know how the NSA gathers things. Isn't that dangerous in itself? Because if we open up what is being done clandestinely at this point to try to find the killers out there, don't the killers then and the cowards have an idea of knowing exactly what is happening, and then they're able to sidestep it and thus, once again, interfere with our own national security and personal security?
It's a very valid point, but the reality is, from my perspective, that ultimately the greater concern is the right of the individual. I do not want any of my communication, regardless of whether there may be a buzzword there or a keyword there or something that some algorithm may pick up, monitored in any capacity. And I believe that constitutionally, I'm protected from that level of intrusion. If there is a mention of keywords, buzzwords, or whatever these algorithms or programs may pick up, my concern is, who's to say that the individuals that are engaging in terroristic acts or any other acts of violence or any acts against this country are the only individuals using those particular terms? So my concern is that without question, the program in and of itself must intrude on fundamental liberties.
All right.
And for me, I think that's inherently violative of who we are.
Let me get to this right now. Let me go to you, Jessie Jane, on this, because here's a list of external bodies that are responsible for ensuring the NSA adheres to U.S. laws. This list just seems to go on, but here's just a few, and I want our viewers to see it. The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, President's Intelligence Oversight Board, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, Department of Defense, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and the Department of Justice. It would just seem that already there is incredible oversight here, and there is much more than even many people would say needs to be done in order to make sure that people are protected. How much farther do we need to go?
Yeah, first of all, I welcome this case, because let's just get out in the open about how many cases that the NSA has actually prevented. There have been 54 identified cases where 50 cases that led to arrest. These were potential terrorist threats, okay? So everybody's talking about their liberties. You know what? When a plane hits a building and I die, and we had the capacity of preventing it by using the very intelligence that NSA was designed to collect, then isn't that a lack of prevention of taking care of my civil liberties, my life, my right to freedom? I'm appalled that people are sitting here and treating this as if, and there's no evidence, none that has been acquired, where somebody's civil liberties have been violated. First of all, you must have probable cause to even start addressing an American citizen. The sole purpose of this collection that they do monitor is to prevent our deaths. I live in Washington, D.C. We're close to how many thousands of people were killed during September 11th. How about New York City? September 11th had over 3,000 people collectively killed between Pennsylvania, Pentagon, and in New York City. And when you look at the reality that we could have potentially prevented that attack, since then, there was a terrorist who was arrested in New York City who was going to blow up the subway system because of NSA. So I challenge all these people who want to talk about civil liberties. What about my liberty and my right to live? Because I expect the government to do one thing, and I am not a big government gal. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not. But there's one thing I demand of my government: to protect me. That is its one purpose that I know they are required to do.
All right.
Right now, Al-Qaeda, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I only got about 2 minutes left here, so Carlos, I want to throw it to you then for a shot here. Is that all fair, or is that, in the words and the thinking of some people on the ACLU side of things, paranoia on that side, just to be fearful of what may happen?
I'm a firm believer in a quote by Benjamin Franklin, who ultimately said that those that are willing to give up essential freedoms for civil liberties or for any liberty deserve neither. I think that the NSA is a phenomenal agency. It's a requirement or required agency for us to subside. Here, however, the reality is I think that there should be limitations. And once there is an infringement upon the rights of everyday citizens or individuals, I think it's excessive. And at this point, really, my issue is transparency.
It is fair to say, though, that there really is, I think, as Jessie Jane said, there's really no evidence of things infringing on people's liberties. Would you agree with that?
There's no evidence because the case has been fought every step of the way. Again, we have a case that was brought several years ago by the ACLU and that was ultimately dismissed on standing grounds, which would, to me, legally seem almost ridiculous based on the fact that every individual is affected by some of these large telecommunications companies. Yeah, so my concern is really that. I think that we may have.
Okay, wait a minute. Go ahead.
I think we may have.
Hang on, Jessie Jane. Hang on 1 sec, Jessie Jane. Carlos, 10 seconds. Finish your point, please.
I think that we very well may have some evidence. However, it's just simply not been permitted to come forward. I welcome this lawsuit. I'm fascinated by this lawsuit, and I think that ultimately it'll give a greater level of clarity to the particular issue.
Jessie Jane, 20 seconds. You have the last shot.
Okay, let's tell the terrorists what we won't do. Our president has already done that with our overseas situation, that we will not defend ourselves. We will not put boots on the ground. So guess what? Let's tell them you have free reign in the U.S. Right now, Al-Qaeda has published a magazine called How to Build a Bomb in the Kitchen of Your Mom, directed at your lone wolf people here in the United States, how to attack us in Las Vegas, New York City, and it's a magazine written in English. So if we don't think that we need to be out there searching for what these people could be potentially doing to harm us, then we're naive. And
All
I'm
right.
not going to bury my head in the sand.
Well put points by both of you. Absolutely. Carlos Gonzalez, Jessie Jane Duff, thank you so much for being with us. We will do this again.
Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. Later on this hour, one last note on the most impactful story to shake the very foundation of Beltway politics in generations. That's in Telling It Like It Is, later, right here on MidPoint.